child marriage and child refugees are a recurring problem of Africa continent. So let's look at the African role as a consumer and as a role as a consumer and producer. The movement of goods, services, finance, and human services across the nation border has been driving social, economic, and political globalization, especially in the past 6 decades. Historically, international trade theory have attempted to explain the reason why country trade and the benefit are derived from such transactions. For instance, classical or traditional theories such as absolute advantage and comparative advantage, the exchange only factor endowment, argue that country involved in cross-border commerce largely because of the relative cost of production or factor endowment over other nations. Consequently, it has become imperative for nations to trade by exporting products and that they have a comparative or competitive production factors and importing products that are scarce domestically. The party explain why African countries largely expand primary commodity and import processed or manufactured goods. On the other hand, modern trade theorists stress there are many factors beyond the relative cost of production or factor endowment. They argue that the gains from trade are heavily determined by imperfect competition, increasing economies of scale, technological advancement, taste and level of per capita income in country. Historically, between 17th and early 20th century, the share of agricultural trade as a percentage of the total global trade was about 50%. Nonetheless, this has steadily increased over the decade of fuels and mining and manufacturing production have taken over. Even though trade has substantially grown, it has also been diverse across regions and continents. The developing country share of the total mechanized trade has also increased. Developed countries relating importance and skill supplies in global markets has declined. Nonetheless, they account for slightly above half of the value of mechanized export. World trade fell in 2015 partially as a result of a reduction in the oil and other commodity price. China was once again the global leading mechanized exporter, followed by the USA and Germany. On the other regional level, they recorded in Africa as a whole share in the African regional blocks is Africa Community EAC Community Economic Commun sorry. So block East Africa Economic Community um, of Central Africa, which is known as ECCAS, Southern Africa Development Community, which is known as SADC, and Economic Community of West Africa, which is known as ECOWAS. In the mechanized export also substantially reduced in the same period under the study. Nevertheless, SADC has continued to lead following ECOWAS just as South Africa and Nigeria are the first and second largest exporter from the continent. African mechanized trade has risen faster than those of the developed and developing economy. However, the continent still accounts for a low share of world trade, and it has been decreasing instead of increasing. Although the value of export in Africa has also increased, its export share as a proportion of global export has been decreasing steadily. Mechanized export of African countries and other less developed countries, SDC, have been marginally affected by a sharp fall in the price of crude oil mining and other primary agricultural products. The level of Africa export mechanized trade rose from $3.4 billion in 1948 to about $92 billion in 1993. It then increased to reach the peak in 2030, which is $601 billion, and steadily declined in 2014, which is $552 billion, and then subsequently decreased to about $396 billion in 2015. The share of the continent in the global mechanized export also shrunk from 7.3% in 1948 to 2.4% in 2015. African mechanized exports witnessed a significant decline, minus 28.4% in dollar terms in 2015, according to the about 40% decline in the region export in the oil exporting countries such as Nigeria, minus 45%, Angola minus 44%, and Algeria minus 40% in 2015. This slowdown has been partially occasioned by the ample of other factors, including political turmoil in some countries in the continent. The over-dependence of some oil-producing countries in oil export in the region resulted in the decline of Nigeria's shares of the world mechanized oil from 0.9% in 2012 to 0.31% in 2015. On individual country level, indicates that South Africa, Nigeria, Algeria, Angola, and Morocco were the leading mechanized exporter in Africa in 2015. The share of these 5 countries in the continent rose to 47% in 1948 to 57% in 2015. However, this country export value at the world market shrank from 3.5% in 1948 to 1.4% in 2015. Okay, let's quickly look at the contemporary new statehood. Africa is both in the birthplace of mankind and the cradle of civilization. It is also endowed with enormous human and natural resources. Many years after independence, African nations continue to grapple with the bad governance, insecurity, endemic poverty, and underdevelopment. It is paradoxically that Africa has today become the unlikeliest to be made comfortable and habitable. And the disturbing fact of that African country constitute the overwhelming majority of the underdeveloped countries of the world. Africa has an urgent development challenge in the world economy today. Economic Commission of Africa, because of the low level of income per head of most countries in Africa. This is a development challenge because it implies a high level of deprivation, poverty, and human vulnerability and low living standards. After 50 years of independence of most African countries, majority of these countries are yet to enter the promised kingdom of the development. To be sure, the development crisis in Africa has become a reoccurring issue, coming with the series of the contradictions inherent in every epoch of African society. The continent has passed through different phases, starting from primitive to slave society, colonialism, and decolonization, and neocolonialism. Today, the development crisis is one of the most severe challenges confronting Africa. Several decades after the end of the colonialism, despite the abundant human and mineral resources, Africa remains largely under development. Over the years, Africa has been climbing the ladder of development rather than slowly. The African development crisis has been shown in the increasing ability of different countries in the continent to provide basic needs to the people. All action and remedial steps geared toward addressing this situation in Africa also far been ineffective in tackling the menace. This shows why Africa today remain at the very lowest point of development. If you look at that, Africa has been a setback to the world economy, and the country themselves, because of the rate of the corruption in the society, has not really bring anything good to the table, and it has impoverished the life cycle of the citizens of Africa. Okay, let's continue. How has Africa got into such an appalling state? Various arguments have also been advanced for the causes of underdevelopment in Africa. While some argue that these problems are external, that is, they are imposed or caused by years colonialism. Others argue that they are internal, that is, self-inflicted problem. For instance, colonialism distorted and retarded the pace and table of development and trend of civilization in Africa. In their analysis, Fatile posited that the development delivered in Africa has been attributed to the problem of exploitation and repression perpetrated by the colonial master. This position was taken by the Walter Rodney in his famous book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. The destruction showed how Africa was robbed of resources and potential precisely through the slave trade, colonialism, and imperialism exploitation. The account by most scholars on this crisis and development in Africa point toward the exploitation tendencies of the colonialism and how Africa God-given resources were siphoned through colonialism by the global north without downplaying the role of the global north in the crisis of development in Africa. It is very important to point out that there is a need to go beyond the impact of exogenous factor of development in Africa by looking to a new narrative that better explain most independence development crisis on the development after more than 50 years of statehood of most of this country. No one disputes the fact that external factors have been impact on the socio-economic development on the continent. However, as argued in the article, development challenge pose, as argued, the development challenge posed by external factors are hindrance to be surmounted, not permanent reason for the present state of underdevelopment. Thus, the need for a new narrative for explaining the crisis of development in Africa in this 21st century is becoming more compelling. Flowing from the above argument, it posits that without absolute isolating the impact of internal variable on the problem of socio-economic development of Africa. It is our time to look beyond this commonly held narrative of Africa development, locating problem within the crisis of leadership and state ineffectiveness in Africa, which is based on the backdrop of existing socio-political structure in most countries on the continent. This position is in line with what Rodney pointed at the fact that advancements of new stage of development is precondition on the capacity to deal with environment and the particularity in the superstructure of any given society. Such superstructure, according to Rodney, include pattern of behavior, form of government, and system of belief that can never exactly be in the same in any two society. Neutralism and non-alignment is the next topic we will be discussing here. Neutralism, also called non-alignment, in international relations, the peacetime policy of avoiding political or ideological affiliation with major power bloc. The policy was pursued by some countries in India, Yugoslavia, and many of the new states of Africa, Asia, and Africa during the period of the Cold War between 1945 and 1990. These countries refused for the most part to align themselves with either the communist bloc led by the Soviet Union or the Western Bloc led by the United States. Though neutralists in this sense, they were not neutral or isolationists, for they participated actively in international affairs and took position in the international issue. Neutralism must also be distinguished from neutrality, which is a term in international law referring to the rule that states are obliged to follow during a legal state or war in which they are belligerent. The widespread exposure of neutralism as a distinct policy was a post-World War II phenomenon, but similar policy were followed, though to a lesser extent. Prior to the period, the so-called isolationist policy and avoidance of an entangled alliance advocated for the United States by the President George Washington and Thomas Jefferson pursued during the European War between France and Great Britain followed the French Revolution, and for centuries after the Peace of 1815 were analogous to the 20th century policy of neutralism. In the second half of the 20th century, many nations took up the position of neutralism, with the meeting of the Bangor Conference of 1955 of 29 countries for the purpose of, among other issues, establishing their neutralism. The non-alignment movement was conceived. The first meeting of the non-aligned nation was in Belgrade in 1961. A group number of neutral nations met again in 1964 and 1970. Roughly every 3 years thereafter, some 100 states that eventually became involved in this movement justified their position on a number of grounds. They declined to assume that the United States, the Soviet Union, or other new countries necessarily intended to embark upon aggressive action designed to violate their territorial integrity, and therefore they refused to enter into alliance or collective defense arrangement directed against particular states. The new nations of Africa and Asia, which made up the largest group of neutralist states, were mostly former colonies of the Western European power. These new nations were on the one hand wary of permanent and close alignment with these powers in the Western Bloc for fear of being drawn into a newer form of dependency. On the other hand, though generally attracted by offer of economic assistance and from Western territory of various communist countries, they fear that intimate tie with the Soviet Union could also threaten their independence. As a practical matter or a neutralist policy, often enable them to get such needed economic assistance from both power blocks. The non-aligned movement experienced considerable difficulty in establishing a unified policy on many issues in international affairs. Many of the members nations were enemies such as Iran and Iraq, and through non-alignment proved an elusive goal with the end of the Cold War and the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991. Neutralism lost much of its usefulness as a guiding principle in the many nations' foreign relations. So then finally, the last topic under this course, which is the imperialism and neo-colonialism. Neocolonialism is a continuation of reposition of imperialist rule by the state, usually a former colonial power, over another nominal and dependent state, usually a former colonial colony. Neocolonialism take the form of economic imperialism, globalization, cultural imperialism, and conditional aid to influence or control a developing country instead of the previous colonial method of direct military control or indirect political control hegemony. Neocolonialism differs from standard globalization and development aid with typical result in a relationship of dependency, subservience or financial obligation toward the colonialist nation. This may result in the undue degree of political control or spiral debt application, functionally imitating a relationship of traditional colonialism, neocolonialism, frequent effect of level of society, creating new colonial systems that disadvantage local communities, such as neo-colonial science. Coined by the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre in 1956, it was first used by Kwame Nkrumah in the context of African country undergoing decolonization in the 1960s. Neocolonialism is also discussed in the work of Western thinkers such as Sartre, Colonialism and Neocolonialism, 1964, and Noam Chomsky, the Washington Connection and Third World Fascism, 1979. When first proposed, neocolonialism was applied to European countries, continuing economic and cultural relationship with their former colony. Those African countries that had been liberated in the aftermath of the Second World War at the 1962 National Union of Popular Forces Conference, Mehdi Ben Baka, the Moroccan political organizer and later chair of the Trico-Continental Conference of 1960, used the term Al-Istimar Rijade, the new colonialism, to describe the political trend in Africa in the early 60s. Nkrumah Kwame, president of Ghana from 1960 to 66, is credited with the coining term, which appeared in the 1963 preamble of the Organization of African Unity Charter, and was titled of a 1965 book, Neo-Colonialism and Last Stage of Imperialism. Nkrumah theoretically developed and extended to the post-World War II 20th century with socio-economic and political argument presented by Lenin in the pamphlet Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, 1917. The pamphlet frame 19th century imperialism is a logical extension of geopolitical power to meet the financial investment need of the political economy of capitalism. In neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, Kwame Nkrumah wrote, in place of colonialism as a main instrument in imperialism, we have today neocolonialism, which, like colonialism, is an attempt to export the social conflicts of the capitalist country. The result of neocolonialism is a foreign capital is used for the exploitation rather than for the development of the less developed part of the world. Investments under neocolonialism increase rather than decrease the gap between the rich and the poor country of the world. The struggle against neocolonialism is not aimed at excluding the capital of the development world operating in less developed countries. It is also dubious in the consideration of the game, name game being strongly related to the concept of colonialism itself. It is aimed at preventing the financial power of the developed country being used in such a way to impoverish the less privileged and less developed countries. Let's look at the Franca Africa. The Franc Africa, the representative example of European neocolonialism in Franc Africa. The French Africa, constituted by the continent's close relationship between France and its former Africa colony. In 1955, the initial stage of the term French Africa by the President Félix Houphouët-Boigny of Ivory Coast denoted positive social, cultural, and economic Franco-Africa relation, and it was later applied to by neocolonialism critics of describe an imbalanced international relation. Neocolonialism was used to describe a large of foreign intervention in countries belonging to Pan-Africanist movement as well as Asian African Conference of Bandung 1955, which led to the new non-alignment movement of 1961. Neocolonialism was formally defined by the All Africa People Congress (AAPC) and published in the Resolution on Neocolonialism at both the Tunis Conference of 1916 and in the Cairo Conference of 1961. AAPC described the action of French and communists of independent states organized by France as neocolonial. The politician Jacques Foccart, the principal advisor for African matters to French President Charles de Gaulle, that is between 1958 and 1969, and Georges Pompidou, 1969 to 74, was the principal proponent of Franc Africa. The work of Warshaw Betty reported a 40-year post-independent relationship with France's former colonial people, which featured colonial garrison in situ and monopolies by French multinational corporations, usually for the exploitation of mineral resources. It was argued that the African leaders with close ties to France, especially during the Soviet American Cold War, 1945 to 1991, acted more as agent of French business and geographical interests and as the national leader of sovereign state. Cited examples are Omar Bongo, Gabon, Félix Houphouët-Boigny of Ivory Coast, Gnassingbé Eyadema of Togo, Denis Sassou Nguesso of Republic of the Congo, Idriss Déby of Chad, and Amani Diori of Niger. And let's look at the Belgian Congo. The Belgian approach to approach to Belgium and Congo has been characterized as a quintessential example of neocolonialism, as the Belgium embraced rapid decolonization of the Congo with expectation that the newly independent state would become dependent on Belgium. This dependence will allow the Belgians to exert control over Congo, even though Congo was formerly independent. After the decolonization of Belgium, Belgium continued to control through the Société Générale de Belgique as an estimated 70% of the Congolese economy following the decolonization process. The most contested part was the province of Katanga, where the Union Minière du Haut-Katanga, part of the society and controlled the mineral resources rich province after a failed attempt to nationalize the mining industry in the 1960s. It was reopened to foreign investment. So that is the end of our class. So thank you for coming online today and receive this class, which is the last class for this online course, New State in World Policies. So hopefully, I wish you well in your next exam. Hopefully to meet you next time, not on this course, maybe on another course. Thank you very much, the students. Thank you, the viewers. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this course. Good night. Bye-bye.